Often attributed to the Colombian author Gabriel Garcia Marquez as a letter to his friends as he was dying, this reading in fact has much more humble roots. It was written by a Mexican ventriloquist, Johnny Welch, to be spoken by his puppet. Either way, it acts as great advice for someone at the end of his life to someone in the youth of theirs. If I had my time again, I possibly would not say all that I think, but I would definitely think about all that I say. I would value things, not for what their price, but for what they really mean. I would sleep little and dream more. I would always express my enjoyment of even the simplest things. I would listen when others speak. I would bask in the sun and expose not just my body, but my very soul. I would not let a single day pass without telling those whom I love how much I love them. I would convince every man or woman for whom I care for just how much I care for them. I would give a child wings, but I would let him learn how to fly. I would prove men how wrong they are to think that they stop loving when they grow old, when in fact they grow old only when they stop loving. I would show the aged that death does not come when we grow old, but when we forget. In my life, I have learned that everyone wants to live at the top of the mountain without realizing that true happiness only comes from the way you make the climb. I have learned that when a newborn baby grasps his father's fingers in his tiny fist for the first time, he has a hold on him forever. I have learnt that a man only has the right to look down on others when he intends to help them up. Wait no longer, set your course. Take the time for a smile, an embrace, a kiss, and never too busy to grant a wish. Show your friends how much they mean to you. Keep those you love close to you. Whisper to them how much you need them, how much you love them, and treat them well. Take the time to say, I'm sorry, forgive me, please, thank you, and all the words of love you know. Nobody will remember you for your secret thoughts. Ask God for the strength and wisdom to express them. Put your dreams into action. This is the moment, and the opportunity is yours. It was given to you. You must have been created and chosen for some reason. Make shine that which makes you entirely unique.
First Corinthians 13 verses 1 to 13. If I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but didn't love others, I would only be a noisy gong of a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had faith that I could move mountains, but didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It's not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. prophecy, and speaking in known languages, and special knowledge will become useless, but love will last forever. Now our knowledge is partial and incomplete, and even the gift of prophecy reveals only parts of the whole picture. But when the time of perfection comes, these partial things will become useless. When I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in the mirror. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All I know now is partial and incomplete. But then I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely. 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love.
A few times at prize giving, and I always feel the need to explain it, because it's the sort of hymn that you associate with the last night of the proms and chest-thumping and tub-thumping patriotism and public school prize givings. In fact, the song we're about to sing, which is Jerusalem, is not a tub-thumping anthem about how wonderful our country is. It was written as a commitment by the author to make the country he loved better than it was. It's an anthem that Billy Bragg, for example, included on an album of socialist songs. But whether you're a socialist or not, the whole point of Jerusalem is to recognize that we live in a country that we may love, that it is imperfect, and that true patriotism is to make it better. Let's stand. Well, good morning to everybody here. Parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, friends, students, staff. This is the first prize giving, what a giveaway. This is the first Parents' Day we've had for 3 years. And it's wonderful to be back with everybody in the hall. The one thing missing from our normal Parents' Day is the sunshine. Every one we've had since I've been here, we've had sunshine on this day. I think it will brighten up later, but thank you so much for coming this morning, for supporting us. And I hope that parents in particular will have a great day discovering what the young people have been up to around the school. And thank you to the staff and the students for putting that on for them. We've had our first part of the day with our meeting. The second part is a chance for us to reflect on the year that has gone past, and to think together as a community about what we might have learned from it and what we might have achieved during it. The third part, following coffee, is to go around the school. There are programs that will be available for you to pick up as you go out that will tell you what is going on where, so you can have a chance over coffee to think about where you'd like to be. And please spend as much of the rest of the morning as you can going around the school and seeing what's on. And Martin, I think, will say a few more things about lunch and how that works after we've spoken. So it's my great pleasure and privilege to start with to introduce to you Eric and Libby, our outgoing head Reeves, who are going to say a few things about this year in the life of Bootham School.
What is community? What does community mean to you? If we take the dictionary definition, it means simply a unified body of individuals. But we would argue that a community is much more than just being together physically. A community means that we have an understanding of one another, of our strengths and weaknesses, and what we strive to become together. At Bootham, this message is conveyed through our school motto, Member Sumus Corporis Magni. We are all members of one greater body. This theme of community is something that is integral to life at Bootham. And with that being said, we just want to say how lovely it is to be returning to having Parents' Day in person again, and to see so many people here, both familiar and unfamiliar faces. For some of you, this may be the first Parents' Day you've been able to attend in person, and for others, it may sadly be your first and your last. Nevertheless, we're glad to be welcoming you all here today. It's fair to say that, because of the pandemic, these last 2 years have been ever so slightly rocky, and with that it has meant that we haven't been able to continue some beloved traditions of Bootham, such as Parents' Days like this, Old Scholars' Day, and even day-to-day activities such as full school morning meetings. However, we'll go into that a little more in the next 10 minutes or so.
Thinking all the way back to the final morning meeting in March of 2020, on the Friday before the national lockdown was announced in the UK, little did we know that this would be our final opportunity to meet together for a long time. We really had no idea what was to come, and with that came an inevitable sense of uncertainty and unknowing. However, as a school community, we knew that we were not alone in our feelings of fear and anxiety, and we would still have the support of one another, even though we may not have been together physically. This feeling was best expressed through the words of Charlie Mackesy, an artist and author who Martin introduced us to when we returned to school in his book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. Everyone is a bit scared, said the horse, but we are less scared together. This sense of community was apparent even in the midst of COVID lockdowns, as our teachers strive to keep the energy and commitment to fantastic lessons consistent despite a very difficult set of circumstances. And it's to them we need to particularly thank for keeping our community so close and strong, in spite of us being physically apart during remote learning.
Obviously, with the pandemic, it's meant that events such as this have not been able to happen in person. However, this has not meant that we feel as though we have lost our sense of belonging as a school throughout this. If anything, the continued sense of community has brought strength to the school, and we are so glad that we are able to share with you what life at Bootham has been like since we saw you last.
Just like any school, Bootham is constantly changing and evolving. In the last 2 years, we have had many additions to the staff. Becca Atkins, who came as head of RS, Jess, our artist in residence, Jasmine, our new art technician, Kaylee, who has taken on the role of head of social action, Richard, our new director of music, Claire, our interim academic deputy head, Sue Tomlinson, who has recently returned to Bootham as a College 1 form tutor, and most recently, we're delighted to welcome Madeleine Bowley, who has joined Bootham as our new academic deputy head. However, with the welcome of new faces, this inevitably meant that we had to say goodbye to some very cherished members of staff this year, those being Jill Simpson, Becca Atkins, Gemma Campbell, Lucy DeGuy, Carolyn Duplessis, Sally Gray, Nigel Langford, Mark Shuttleworth, Sophie Smith and Stefan Srocker, all of which have taught at Bootham for a combined total of 41 years, around there somewhere. We've also had many extended additions to the Bootham community in the last 18 months too. Kitty Wilson, George Triffan, Kerry Haynes MacDonald, Ruth Gilroy and Hannah Fian have all welcomed children into the world in this last year, those being Posey, Hugo, Ruben, Raphael and Henry, news to which we send our utmost congratulations to all staff. Talking of family, the theme of love continues to take precedence as Paul Fian, one of our music teachers, recently got married. Once a part of Bootham, we have a lifelong connection, and our impact remains even many years after we have left. This is especially apparent when we think of our dearly loved former chemistry teacher, Chris Dobson, who recently passed away after a short illness. Among many things, Chris will be remembered by the students he taught for over 3 decades as a favoured teacher who showed love and care to all his students, regardless of their aptitude for his subject. Another sad loss to the community is the passing of Alison Spaulding, a former science technician who will be remembered for her meticulous and consistent support and care for more recent students in chemistry. We hold both Chris and Alison in the light, and our love and thoughts go to their family and friends.
And of course, this cannot go unsaid, the loss of Peter Woodmansey. Peter, who was part of the head Reeves team before us, passed away in early December of 2020 after a short period of illness. It came as an overwhelming shock to lose such a kind and admired member of our school community. As a school, we responded to this immediately by opening the doors to our meeting hall on the Sunday we learned of Peter's death, to allow students and staff to come and mourn the loss of Peter, but more importantly, to support one another. After our final meeting in December, we as students were each given a candle to take home with us, to remind us that there can be lightness and hope even in the darkest of days. We, as college students, were extremely grateful for this, as this was yet another reminder of how, despite us being away from each other physically, there was still a poignant sense of community and togetherness at a time where we needed it most.
One thing which has remained consistent in the world of unpredictability which we live in is the school's constant advocacy for social action and helping those in need, something which has really taken a main focus in school life in the last year as a result of the efforts of Kaylee Oliver, our head of social action.
It should be noted that there has been a constant theme throughout the year of charity and fundraising events, that being the Quaker tenet of peace. For instance, on International Peace Day in September, students and staff came together to stand on Bootham in order to hold a vigil. Little did we realise how precious peace would be in the coming months in light of all that has happened on the stage of international affairs. Later on in the year, there was a whole school non-uniform day in order to raise money for those living in Ukraine, whereby the theme was peace, love and kindness. Furthermore, students in College 1 organised an initiative to collect donations for those affected, which resulted in many members of the community bringing items to be sent over. In total, as a school, we collected and sent approximately 15 tonnes of donations, which were all moved by College 1 volunteers carried by hand. Additionally, it cannot go without being mentioned that staff have been thoroughly involved with fundraising too. Peter Rankin shaved his full beard and head of hair in order to raise funds for those in Ukraine, which resulted in a grand total of £3,104.04 being raised for the cause. So far this academic year, in total, the school has raised just over £10,000 for charity, which is an immense achievement.
We feel that Bootham has truly gone above and beyond in the last year regarding fundraising and charity events, from themed non-uniform days to bake sales to public displays of solidarity to those less fortunate. These things, we believe, truly illustrate the reasons that we are greatly proud of being members of the Bootham community. Despite the disruption to regular day-to-day life as a result of the pandemic, since the easing of regulations, we have seen Bootham bounce back from COVID. We have been lucky enough to return to these activities which we cherish so dearly as a school, especially those in the arts. For instance, in March of this year, we were able to put on a whole school production of Beauty and the Beast, which was, as always, a spectacular performance. We've also been able to host our termly concerts, which act as a display of the range of talents throughout the entire school and wider community, including our school's community choir. A more recent example being the spring concert, which marks our new director of music, Richard Elaine's first major concert here at Bootham, a resounding success by many accounts. As well as successes in the arts, Bootham has also excelled in sports this year too. Notably, the first 11 football team reached the quarter-final of the County Cup, the under-15 basketball team winning district competitions, additionally, the under-16 basketball team being crowned county champions, the under-12 netball team winning the York and District League netball tournament, which did mean that they beat St Peter's, by the way. It has also been noted by Andy Bell, our head of PE, that the netball teams have, in particular, gone from strength to strength this year, with over 80% of games won across the 6 age groups. As well as showing serious vigour on the courts, the girls' football is continuing to develop well, with the under-15s playing in the national ISFA competition for the first time and getting through to the second round. However, the main joy is witnessing the very large number of our students involved in all sports and all sorts of physical activities throughout the school, and the enjoyment that is derived from this participation.
As you all know, the pandemic meant that so many things which were a part of prior normality had to stop. The ripple effect of COVID meant that life at Bootham had to make some changes too, changes which were integral to our day-to-day routine. For instance, it was only March of this year that we were able to get the whole school back in the meeting hall again. Could we ever have realised that it would take 2 full years to make it happen? This went hand in hand with the adoption of some somewhat peculiar practices, such as year group bubbles and the infamous jazzy multicoloured tape around the school. These restrictions meant that for the first 2 years of some students' life at Bootham, they were not even able to see the full school site.
With these limitations, however, this meant that something fairly unique to Bootham was confined to, that being inter-year friendships. However, as the pattern has gone so far, these friendships were able to remain strong despite not being able to socialise with each other physically. Thank goodness for social media. We think it's fair to say, however, that these changes have made us realise how much we, and all members of Bootham, truly cherish the community which we have at school. All of the things that we have mentioned are arguably events and practices that we took for granted before the pandemic, especially how these events made us wholly connected as a community.
With that being said, especially having you all here today in physical form, we're sure that we'll be able to return to a fuller sense of togetherness to add to the many other ways we are connected as a school community. Despite having only returned to normality for such a short while, the school has received the utmost praise in our most recent inspection, receiving an excellent grading. ISI inspectors came to school for 3 days in January to see what life at Bootham was like. And we are proud to say that even after the pandemic, external inspectors came into school when able to identify Bootham's best qualities.
For instance, in the report, the inspectors highlighted that students are unassumingly self-confident and comfortable in whom they are, a consequence of the school's Quaker ethos, which has created a close-knit and inclusive community. And in addition to this, it was also noted that pupils spoke warmly and with enthusiasm about how the ethos of the school helps everyone feel equally included as a human being of unique worth. It's always a relief when you know that the inspectors have seen you on your best behaviour.
The report shed light on the fact that even after a very difficult 2 years, people were able to come into the school and be enlightened of the profound sense of community and the strength of the Quaker ethos which runs throughout, both students and staff, which is something that makes us as students exceedingly proud of Bootham in our community. We believe that the sense of community and togetherness, which was highlighted, has truly been shown in the last year in our fundraising efforts, charity events, school productions, and many other things.
As our time at Bootham nears to an end, we are becoming more aware of the fact that each time we do things, it is the last time we may do it. We have taken part in our last Christmas concert now, our last sports day, and also eaten our last roast dinner too. All things that we will miss dearly about Bootham, as well as many other things of which there are too many to mention. However, we know that the sense of community which we've been so lucky enough to have been a part of for the last 7 years or so will always remain a part of who we are, despite leaving Bootham physically.
It's a scary feeling going from the safety and familiarity of school into the wider world, especially having only so recently just emerged from our first ever set of public exams, which have seemingly come and gone in a blink. But it does not matter how the sky may have seemed ever so grey for a while, as the light is gently starting to break through again. And with the constant support of an ever-cherished community, the outside world does not seem so scary anymore.
This feeling is best put yet again by Charlie Mackesy. "Those are dark clouds," said the boy. "Yes, but they'll move on," said the horse. "The blue sky above never leaves." Thank you.
Take your jacket off and leave your glasses in the top pocket is the motto of this story. Thank you so much to the choir and to Richard for that lovely version of Seasons of Love from the musical Rent by Jonathan Larson. And you'll see why I asked them to sing it as I go through my talk. And thank you to Libby and to Eric also for such a wonderful introduction to our year and for all the things that they observed about that. Seems to me that the older the human race gets, and the more advanced it thinks it has become, the more it seems to want to prove that by measuring stuff. Indeed, the more it seems to imagine that only stuff that can be measured is actually worth anything. Now, just have a look at some of the bizarre units of measurement that exist these days, and you'll realise that this has gone completely out of control. Here's one, a Mickey, which is the measure of the smallest detectable movement of a cursor on a computer screen, caused in turn by the movement of a mouse, which is approximately 0.1 millimetres. Here's another one, the beard second. This is true, which apparently represents the amount that the average physicist's beard grows in 1 second, which in turn is equivalent to 5 or perhaps 10 nanometers. Bizarrely, the reason for this alternative is there is actually no consensus in the rate of beard growth, which rather undermines it as a unit of measurement in my book. Also, I wonder whether the average changes with any welcome growth in the number of female physicists or changes in the facial habits of the entire physics community. I'm sure many of us have used or at least heard some variant on the term, "I'll be there in a jiffy." Did you know that it is in fact a real measurement of time, defined as the time between cycles of an alternating current, or 1/60th of a second? This is all too much physics for me, so let's go back to something I like more. Going a little bit further back in time, we find the smoot, the measure of distance equivalent to 5 feet 7 inches, which happened to be the height, or when lying down, the length of Oliver R. Smoot, a student at Harvard University who was used by his friends to measure the span of the Harvard Bridge in Boston, as you can see them doing in this photograph. The answer proved to be 364.4 smoots, which is almost 1 smoot for every day of the year. One of my favourite of these bizarre measurements is cowgrass, a measure from rural Ireland designed to express the size of a field in terms of how many cows could successfully graze on it at any one time. We're good at measuring things. Measuring stuff, as I've said, is an inescapable part of life, not least in the most vital, or at least straightforward part, of judging the success in the modern world. I've spent more time over the past 17 and a half years than I care to admit, if I'm really honest, trying to tell some governors in both schools I've been part of that just because something can't be measured doesn't mean it's not important. And conversely, just because something can be measured, it doesn't mean it therefore must be of value. And that's the theme of what I'd like to say this morning. Just because something can't be measured doesn't mean it's not important. And just because something can be measured, it doesn't mean it's therefore of value. So, true to my habits, I went searching for the quotation that I've often used, wrongly as it turns out in governors' meetings, to express this. Initially and somewhat inevitably, I came across this quotation from Abraham Lincoln, written just before his death in 1865. Further research turned up the fact that, to no surprise of mine, Albert Einstein is the one who is credited with saying something like I just said. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. In fact, there is absolutely no proof that Einstein said that at all, which is a shame because it's rather good, and I'd like to be able to engage someone of his intellect to back up the point that I'd like to make. He did, however, say this several years after his death. Enough of this nonsense, and on to more nonsense. Perhaps the most obvious repository of the measurement of things that can be counted but might not really count is, of course, the Guinness Book of Records. Heavens, the things that we're prepared to measure and the lengths that people are prepared to go to be measured at being best at them. For those of you who love an ah moment, this is your time. There you go. This is Puggy from Texas, whose tongue is the longest ever recorded in a dog at 11.43 centimetres. I don't think I'd want to be licked by him. somewhat unbelievably, I think you'll see why I've just corrected myself there. There is also a world record for the greatest distance made carrying a table with your teeth with someone sitting on it. Who dreams these things up? Currently, the record is held by George Chrétien from Madrid, who carried a 12-kilogram table with a 50-kilogram person sitting on it in his teeth for 11.8 meters, which begs the question, why? This is Dalibor Jablonowicz from Serbia, who can balance, for some reason, 31 spoons on his face at the same time. Try it at home. And here we have Lee Redmond of Michigan, USA, whose fingernails measured a grand total of 8.65 meters in 2008 until they snapped off in a car accident a year later. And finally, may I introduce you to Brit Gary Turner, flying the flag for our wonderful country, who in 1999 gained the record for the world's stretchiest skin at 16.5 centimetres, a title which he has held ever since. I must admit I was somewhat troubled by a quote from the time when he said, "I've always known my skin was different. As a small child, my uncles used to have fun showing their friends." Must have made family parties quite fun. So, is everything measurable of value? And is everything of value measurable? And what's that got to do with Parents' Day? Well, it revolves around the question, how do you measure a year? The very question that Jonathan Larson was posing in the song that choir sang to us just now. He suggests you might measure it in daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee, in inches, in miles, in laughter, in strife, in 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year in the life? So taking up his challenge, let's have a go. You could measure a year in the life of Bootham like this. 28,906, the total number of lessons taught, which equates to 31,315 hours of teaching time, a grand total of 1,878,890 minutes of teaching, although no stats exist for the number of those minutes that were slept through by students. That equates then to 1,305 continuous days teaching, and I know some of my colleagues feel every moment of them. And that, very early on in my exploration, gives me the opportunity to pay heartfelt tribute to my colleagues who've continued to teach your young people with huge commitment, skill and energy through continuing hard times. It's easy to forget that the nightmare of blended learning was from this year, not last. So please do join me in offering the teachers here a hearty round of applause for all that they do. Other stats may be pertinent. 41.5 is the total number of hours spent in governors' meetings over the course of the year. 14,838, the sum total of all the comments written by teachers on reports. 41,233, the number of emails sent to old scholars, keeping them informed of school life. And 43,467, the total sum raised by this year's Giving Day, predominantly from those old scholars who were the recipients of the 41,233 emails. Given the crazy context in which we've been working over the past couple of years, I think a couple of COVID-related measures would appear to be relevant for the current one. 6,950 is the number of COVID tests distributed to staff and to students this year. 196, the number of students reporting positive COVID tests over the course of it. 777, the number of days between the final meeting before the pandemic and the next one on April the 27th this year. And what a joy and relief it was, as Libby and Eric mentioned, to be all back together in here after so long, and I won't forget that meeting in any sort of a hurry. Perhaps some stats about activities outside the classroom across the school might give us more of a clue. 31,446, an accurate total of the number of bars of music performed by soloists, choirs and ensembles in school concerts over the course of this year. 4,573, the total of goals, runs and points scored by the school's basketball, football, cricket, swimming, rounders and netball teams combined. 688, the number of goals and points, etc., that we scored more than our opponents. Go Bootham. 161 hours of scheduled rehearsals for this year's 3 brilliant school productions. 1.65 kilometres of cable used in the production of Beauty and the Beast. 79,058 is the total credits awarded across the school for the Bootham Challenge, and 151 the number of students earning a Bootham Challenge award at our wonderful ceremony earlier this week. Perhaps we could measure behaviour by comparing rewards and punishments. 4,101 the number of commendations awarded, mostly, it has to be said, to middle schoolrooms and lower and middle schoolrooms. 3,201 the number of columns and monitoring slips issued. Or maybe we could have a small stab at measuring customer satisfaction. Very small indeed, the percentage of parents who didn't answer anything other than agree or strongly agree to every single question on the inspection questionnaire. Truth is, we're not supposed to know the numbers, but we were given the headlines. 0, the number of official complaints received. Perhaps the most telling stat thus far, and the most important one, is this one. I'm going to do this one slightly different. I have a statistic here for the total number of roast potatoes served at dinner on Wednesdays over the course of the year, and I'd like to get an idea from the audience of what you think that number might be. So do just quickly turn to the person next to you and decide what you think total number of roast potatoes served at Wednesday dinner is. Okay, that's quite enough. I have to say that is the most excited I have seen the entire community for about 2.5 years. Any guesses? Anyone want to have a guess at the total number? I've put it up, haven't I? Oh dear. Never work with children, animals and technology when you're as incompetent as I am. I'm sorry about that. Anyone prepared to admit they got close? Yeah. The Gunn family, obviously good at estimating things. That is the exact number. Give or take 20 or so of roast potatoes. It gives me the opportunity to also say some thanks to our brilliant and dedicated support staff in cleaning and catering of facilities and finance and admin and health centre and anything else I've forgotten, for all that they do to enable our community to do its core work and to thrive. And I think they too deserve a round of applause and some thanks. And then there are the totally spurious and quite possibly made-up measures. 14. The difference in kilograms between Peter Rankin's weight before and after he had his hair and beard shaved off for the Ukraine appeal. 3,456. The number of calories that Andy Corell burned off during each performance of Beauty and the Beast while he paced up and down. 437. The total number of hours boarding staff lay awake worrying about whether their boarders would get the negative tests they would need to get home at the end of terms. And sticking with boarding, 326, the number of times that boarders have been caught sneaking out to Sainsbury's/Jackson's when they're not supposed to. Naught. The number of times that Beth Steer has blushed, hesitated, or felt even slightly uncomfortable during relationships and sex education lessons. 5,432, the number of really bad dad jokes told by Rob Gardner. 2, the number of funny dad jokes told by Rob Gardner. And in a similar vein, 947, total number of excuses offered by upper seniors for not handing in work. 3, the total number of original or believable excuses made up by upper seniors for not handing in work. And finally, of course, there are the measures that perhaps are at the sharp end of school life. 11,636,416, the school's projected annual turnover. 252,728, the forecast net surplus for the year to be reinvested back in the development of the school. 690,291, the total of minutes of internal and external exams sat by all our students combined over the year, which equates to 11,505 hours, 479 days of exams sat over the year, which is the equivalent of 1.3 years' worth of exams. Says something about our current educational system. Talking of those exams, however, 60.4 and 70. 60.4 is the percentage of A and A-star grades at A-level last summer, and 70 the percentage of 9s to 7s or the equivalent at GCSE. And finally, the one statistic that I am most proud of this year on behalf of all my colleagues and all our students. 49. The number of times that the judgments excellent, outstanding, and exceptional appear in our recent ISI Educational Quality Inspection Report. Arguably, it is these external measures, the ones that are turned into league tables and the ones that are published on inspectorate websites, that are the ones that the world around us has been conditioned to assume are the best way, perhaps the only valid way, of measuring a school's health and success. But in the end, does it really matter at all what measures are imposed upon us externally? Isn't it much more importantly that we are meeting our own aims, that we are developing within the unique set of parameters and expectations that being a Quaker school provides for us, that we know that what we are doing for our students is working? It won't take much judgment to assume that I think the answer to all those questions is a resounding yes. It won't take much, but because in the final analysis, it's impossible to measure what we achieve at Bootham empirically and do it justice. Whatever stats we use, they can never capture so much of the literally immeasurable work that schools do. Even our really good public exam results still arguably, despite what I said earlier, the means most often used by government and parents and press of judging schools, even those will never get close to telling the whole story. Because, in the end, you can measure exam results, but you can't measure the effort and inspiration that was poured into achieving them. And they cannot tell the often inspirational stories of the students who achieved what for them was real success against the odds. You can measure the number of lessons that a school provides, but not what fills them, or more particularly, the vast amount of help offered by staff beyond them. You can measure participation rates or results, or the huge range of enrichment activities, but never how far self-worth and confidence is built up, or lifelong passions are sparked because of them. You can measure all the practical things that have to be done to make a school thrive, but not the essence and impact of the secure community that work builds. You can measure the extent of good and poor behaviour, but never the depth and quality of the relationships that unpin the tangible happiness in the school and the effect that that has on effective learning. You can measure, as Eric and Libby did, the comings and goings of the staff, but never the care and quality of the care and nurture that they offer to the pupils. You can measure the school's financial position, but never the extent or the permanence of the value that paying the fees purchases. In case this all might sound a little bit self-satisfied, let me be clear. We all know that Bootham is not perfect, far from it. We get things wrong. We make mistakes. There are things that we can and must improve, and we're always learning and trying to do better. With well over 600 imperfect people in the institution on a daily basis, perfection is not an option. But as I've written on a couple of leavers' cards in recent days, life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. In the same way that beauty, love, emotion, music and faith defy measurement and yet are among the most precious things in life, so the things that make Bootham what it is, and that success, I hope that it continues to be, those things cannot be summed up in numbers or in pounds sterling or in any formula. How do you measure a year in the life of Bootham? Measure it in lives changed, in passions ignited, in skills now mastered, in kindness shown, relationships strengthened, extra miles walked, in second chances offered, in mistakes learned from, in futures secured. Ultimately, measure it in the lives of our students, which is, after all, what we're all really here for and what we celebrate today. Thank you for listening. Before we finish the formal part of our meetings today and head off around the school for coffee, I must stop banging the microphone, it's getting in my way, for coffee and a huge number of activities, Richard said that the choir have learnt a very short blessing, which is a very appropriate place to end our meeting today. After they've sung that, Martin will give you one or two announcements, and then it's time to go.
Many thanks to our musicians. Many thanks to you all for coming to our Parents' Day today. 29 and 3, a couple more numbers to throw at you. 29 different activities that will be going on for our Parents' Day this morning. I'm just going to let Matej, Ellie and Jelena out to then give you the programme as you leave. So if you could depart our current Head Reeves team. They're going to be waving these programmes as you leave the hall. If you haven't managed to collect one on your way in, you will have an outline of those 29 different activities, a plethora of different ways of celebrating the lives of our students through this year. And they start just after 10:15. There will be singing in the hall here from lower and middle schoolroom performing extracts from Joseph. So we'll need to clear the hall so they can set up for that. And then do come back if you'd like to hear the lower and middle schoolrooms singing from Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Other activities will start after that. The three are 3 opportunities for refreshment, and there will be coffee and refreshments in the dining room from 10:15 as well. There will be the Foreign Languages Cafe, which will take a little bit of effort to get to. So up flights of stairs, but it will be well rewarded, your effort, and you'll get the opportunity to practice your languages as you order various different delicacies. That will be running from 10:30 to 11:45. Take care of that. And then lunch, of course, I do need to mention your third opportunity for replenishment. Please do be very civilised, orderly as you look to fulfil your appetites at lunchtime. What we're going to ask you to do is to come in gentle, civilised waves from schoolrooms and their parents at 12:45. Seniors and parents, if you could be patient till 1:10, and then college, hold tight with your parents till 1:25. There will be plenty of food for all, but if we could just be patient as we try and get everyone through. Those things will conclude our day. Do enjoy all the different things that are there. Do study your programmes carefully once you receive them, and plan your mornings really astutely so that you can experience the wonders that are out there waiting for you. Have a great day. Thanks very much for coming this morning.